Welcome to the kickoff of the Football is Anime podcast. It feels really good to finally say that. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, also known as Under the Scope in the YouTube circles, and with me is my co-host, Taylor.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? So happy to be here.
This is a podcast idea that I initially put out there on Twitter as kind of like a joke, basically, last September. And surprisingly, people said that they were pretty interested in the idea of a podcast combining anime fandom and football fandom. If you came here for American football, then you're in the wrong place.
Regrettably so.
We could have called this the Soccer is Anime podcast, but I thought that a good chunk of our viewership, all 10 of you, would probably not be American, so calling it soccer would expose us as normie fans.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They know we were the damn Americans who are following.
Exactly. Yeah. How dare these filthy Americans try to inject their soccer takes into this?
Although I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember hearing somewhere that the English actually came up with calling it soccer first instead of football.
That is true, and I believe it comes from association football,
exactly.
The SOC.
Instead of rugby football.
Yeah, so thank the British. Thank you.
You're already learning something from this podcast.
Exactly. That's what you're here for. Maybe. So you might be wondering at this point, what is this podcast? What are you listening to? Basically, I love football, soccer, and I love anime, and I want an excuse to talk about them both. Taylor, I'm sure you feel similarly.
Yeah, no, it's as when you brought the idea to me and you were like, hey, if this is something you're interested in, I was like, I think I maybe read like the first 7 words. I was like, I am on this. Like, you are going to have to kill me to get me off of this. Because, yeah.
And I'm glad to have you.
Yeah, no, it's like, it's great. It's a great idea. I mean, it is crazy to see, and we can talk about this more, just like how much both of them have kind of been evolving and exploding in popularity over in the Western Hemisphere as well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, yeah. No, it's funny because they're both kind of, and this is going to sound funny to people who aren't Americans and so don't live in the American sports culture, but soccer is very much football is very much a niche fandom here still. That's really, really, really growing. Much like anime also is kind of like becoming more and more mainstream in these circles. So like the ways in which both of those fandoms have like materialized in the West and in America specifically is really interesting. And it's something I'm here for because it just means more people that we can actually interact with
right.
in these fandoms. And I was also pretty surprised too to see like the excitement that people were responding to the idea of this podcast about. And I think it kind of gets at the fact that while, yes, football and anime have like really passionate fan bases, they're not fan bases that tend to have a ton of crossover, right? And usually, and not only crossover in terms of people being fans of both, but especially in terms of discussing both, let alone at the same time. We might be crazy. That might not be possible, but we're going to find out.
Yeah. And we are seeing whenever that happens, it makes the news. Like when Japan played Senegal last year in the World Cup, there was the two fans, one from Senegal, one from Japan, singing the One Piece opening together.
Exactly.
And that was like on every major news broadcast.
Yeah.
So there's precedent for this.
I think ultimately the goal of the podcast is to get Sergio Aguero on here.
Yes. We got to get Kun Aguero onto the podcast to talk about it. How much
noted anime fan.
Yes, noted anime fan. Which is why apparently he goes by Kun Aguero because he watched so much anime that like he wanted to be called Sergio Kun, so he became Kun Aguero. And now that's on his jersey.
Absolutely referring to him as Aguero Kun now, or Sergio Kun. Take your pick.
Can you imagine being so much of a weeb that you become a professional soccer player and you're like, no. Please add my weeb nickname to the back of my jersey. I need it everywhere.
You know what? I think at the point that you're Sergio Aguero, you can
get away with it. That's true. You have to win
You've
a
earned
Premier
that
League
much.
first, which, I don't know how that feels, but
Yep. Let's not talk about that. So I'm happy to bring this podcast live from Europa League hell.
oh, oof. You know what?
At least, excuse me, let me correct myself. That's where I'm coming from. Taylor's
Right.
not coming from there.
We've recently, we did our time in purgatory, in Europa League purgatory, but now we are the champions of Europe somehow, while not being the champions of England. But with Brexit, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Oh, yikes. This is probably a good thing to go ahead and get out of the way now. What clubs do you support, Taylor?
So I am first and foremost a diehard Liverpool Football Club supporter. Started following them around 2011, 2012-ish. My memory is a little fuzzy just because we were so terrible in those years that I kind of want to forget them. But yeah, I'm so Liverpool Football Club, and then I was a season ticket holder for New York City Football Club in the MLS for a hot second. When Pirlo was there and David Villa was there. It was a lot of fun going to games, and games were cheap. But for some reason, despite going to all those games, I've always debated being more of a New York Red Bulls supporter. So that's it for my my MLS takes.
I might have a little bit more to say on the MLS takes.
Oh, well then, let me hear it, Jack. So you are a...
First and foremost, I became an Arsenal supporter. R.I.P. Unfortunately, too, I was not an Arsenal supporter back in the glory days of the Wenger years. I became an Arsenal supporter just in time for the rapid decline and fall.
And what a fall it was. Well, it wasn't really a fall. You were just like, consistently fourth, which was...
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I exactly. I was there for the tail end of the meme years, and then also the welcome to purgatory, where I have resided ever since. Yes. Thankfully, the MLS side I support is a bit of a different story. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and so my MLS team is Atlanta United. And since coming onto the scene, they were an expansion franchise in 2017, and in their first season, made the playoffs, had a terrific season, were unstoppable at home pretty much, but had a disappointing finish in the playoffs, getting knocked out in the first round. Right. But last year they came back and won the championship, so right. I'm feeling pretty good about that half.
You guys like that? If you're at home and you've not watched any MLS, just watching Atlanta United FC, which first of all, like, we all made fun of that name, and I feel like we can't anymore because they won an MLS Cup. I still want to, but we can't.
It didn't. All right, look, it didn't help the Atlanta United name that the same year they entered MLS, the other expansion franchise in Minnesota named themselves Minnesota United.
But they were Minnesota United FC before they came to the MLS, back when they were in the NASL.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
But yeah.
So if you want to give Minnesota credit, but you know what? We have the trophy. So
that's true. You have the trophy. They have the better logo with the swan, the goose.
I'll give you the logo.
Yeah.
I'll give you the logo, but not the kit.
That's true. The kit.
Atlanta United has a fire
with the Coca-Cola
kit.
sponsor. Oh man, that's one of the cleaner sponsor logos we have in the MLS.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
if I'm ranking,
explain the Jesus meme with Atlanta United FC?
Oh, what? All of the memes of Joseph Martinez
as Jesus
being photoshopped as Jesus. I mean, he's basically the Messiah of Atlanta right now.
That's
yeah. I mean, this is, I'm sure, something that we'll talk about in a future episode. Just kind of like diving into more detail about like the explosion of soccer and the explosion of anime in America. And having been on the ground in Atlanta that first year that they were a franchise, I wasn't there last year because I've since moved elsewhere in the country. But it was really cool to see just the embrace that the city of Atlanta gave Atlanta United. I mean, you're talking about a city that is notorious in this country for having horrible sports fans, fair weather sports fans that will only jump on the bandwagon of their team once the playoffs roll around or once they finally show a sliver of doing good. it's not exactly known for having the most loyal, dedicated fan base in the country.
Right.
And so to see Atlanta United come in, an upstart franchise that everyone in MLS, everyone associated with U.S. soccer had long said that the city of Atlanta could not support a soccer franchise, that it's not a soccer city, that it's not going to last. And immediately, stadiums were filling, around the streets. It's not Atlanta Falcons gear, which is the NFL team here, or Atlanta Braves, or certainly Atlanta Hawks stuff that you see around. It's Five Stripes. It's Atlanta United everywhere. And ever since then, it's just been an incredible, incredible scene. I've heard people say that it's the closest you can get to a European or South American football atmosphere in America, in the United States. I can't confirm that, seeing as how I've obviously never been to a European or South American football match, but I'll take their word for it.
I wish we could have had that because, New York fans are also known for being very fair weather fans. And when New York City FC was introduced and started up, New York fans lived up to their reputation.
Yeah.
It's like terrible attendance. It's very sad to see. But, so it goes. It's MLS. It's, you have to take the lumps in with the good. Like, it's not going to be really good everywhere at once. You still have to recognize that, it's still finding its footing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you look at FC Cincinnati, who is the new team to the league this year, and the struggles that they've had adapting from what's essentially the second tier of U.S. soccer up to the first tier. For those of you who don't know, American soccer also does American. I was about to say American football,
but that's different.
That's a different sport now. Soccer does not use a pro-rel system in America, so you have franchises in MLS that are just permanently there, which is how sports in general work in the U.S. So yeah, that also can kind of like create some problems of there's not like the urgency and sense of like having to like reach a certain competitive level. As long as profits are rolling in, you can suck as much as you want.
Right. Which we've kind of seen a similar attitude from certain anime studios as well. We're just happy to sell Blu-rays and not really care too much about the quality.
I'm already writing down future episode comparing anime studios to clubs.
If we had a
MLS
pro-rel
clubs,
system
you name
with
it.
anime studios.
Oh, yes, this is brilliant. Typing as we speak.
Every season, the Blu-ray sales determine whether or not you get promoted or relegated.
Oh, God.
Oh,
it's like
man.
The Premier League sides that are like really trying to like get a foothold in like American fan bases and stuff. It's the same thing with like Japanese anime studios that are trying to get that international Netflix appeal,
Like Studio Mappa? Studio Mappa for sure.
Yeah,
has
that's
been doing
true.
That. With Kakegurui, with Yuri on Ice, with
Zombieland Saga.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I would throw Sada Mai into that mix because that's only. Does that even count as a Mappa show?
I feel like Ikuhara almost has like a policy where he can't do an anime at the same studio twice, or maybe it's that like once a studio has done an Ikuhara anime, they're like, no more, please. We can't handle it.
There might be some truth to that, honestly.
Ikuhara as Mourinho, the special one.
Yeah, no, and the other thing with Ikuhara too, I mean, like, and Sada Mai, at least half of it has been done by Ikuhara's own studio and team. Like, only so much. I feel like it's only at Mappa because there's a production committee associated, and it has to be somewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting case to look into, but you can expect more episode ideas like that. That's basically kind of the stuff that like we're getting at here, to kind of high level give you an idea of what this podcast is going to be about.
Exactly.
There will be some episodes that are mostly soccer focused. I can already tell you next month's episode is going to be mostly talking about the Women's World Cup as well as the Copa America and Gold Cup. Then there will probably be some episodes that are more anime focused. I know one idea we'd thrown around was like watching a show and then spending an episode focused on talking about that and having a discussion surrounding that. I'm sure we'll probably try to start with football anime. And there are a surprising amount. if you really look into it. I don't know how many of them are good, but that could be its own interesting discussion.
That's true. I mean, hey, Captain Tsubasa has to be good, right? If it got Fernando Torres to start playing football.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, Chelsea supporters are really happy about.
Oh, man. So, yeah. And then, if there comes a day where we run out of soccer anime to talk about, we could always go towards other sports anime in general.
That's true. And you can finally watch Haikyuu.
That's true. You could find an excuse to force me to watch Haikyuu. I'll be honest, sports anime aren't really my thing.
Oh, interesting.
That might be surprising, right? You would think, like,
given how
it's the perfect,
into
like,
sports
cross-section
and
of
anime
my
you are.
fandoms.
Right.
Exactly, yeah. But I don't know. And I think, all right, maybe it's just that I haven't watched the right ones, or that I haven't given them enough of a chance.
Right.
Because for me, with the ones that I watched, the biggest example for me was Kuroko.
Right.
I watched like 3 episodes of it, and I couldn't get into it. And I think it's because I wanted basketball.
Uh-huh.
And,
not DBZ masquerading as basketball.
And not Dragon Ball. Yeah. So I think maybe if I just... Because sports anime is not sports, right?
Right.
No. Like,
not usually.
Reflection of the sport.
Right.
Not usually. Sometimes it is. Like, my favorite sports anime is probably Ping Pong the Animation.
Right.
And... Do you count that as a sports anime?
Do you count that as an ad? It's like it's a trip. It's an ad.
That's fair. That's part of why I like it.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's out there. It's Yuasa. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say though, there was a recent anime that made me want to give sports anime in general like another shot. And that was Run with the Wind.
Okay.
Which aired last fall and this winter.
I need to finish Run with the Wind.
How far did you get into it?
Me and my roommate were watching it, and we had both. So he did track and cross country until high school. I did a bit of track in like middle school, and then stopped kind of in high school. And some of the things they were talking about felt so unrealistic that it was almost like tough to keep watching it.
Mm-hmm.
But especially weekly.
Yeah.
But I'm probably thinking about like finishing it. I don't like leaving things on hold for too long. So, and I have heard very good things about it from a number of people.
Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely one of those that gets stronger as it goes along. In particular, and what drew me to it the most was the cast. I think it balances an ensemble cast extremely well, and all of the characters feel really fleshed out and have extremely like distinct personalities and stuff that ultimately like forms this really tight knit bond through the group. And it was that group dynamic I think that I like really got attached to.
Right.
And that's something that I know that like sports anime are generally known for. Like Haikyuu, for example.
Right.
You're not the only person that has been pestering me to watch Haikyuu for forever.
I'd be shocked if I was.
Yeah. Shout out to everyone who's been saying that, Paola and Gianni. So yeah, maybe this podcast will be the excuse to get me back into sports anime and football anime in particular. I've never watched a football anime. So that could be an interesting new experience to try.
Gotcha. So then how did you get into football in the first place?
That's a good question. Yeah. So why don't we get the origin story here?
Ooh, let's do it.
Let's do it. So do you want to start with my football origin story or my anime origin story? I'll go ahead and tell you they're very similar stories.
Let's do the football one. It's football is anime. Football's got to come first.
Okay, all right, that's the headliner. Let's do it. My sports watching fandom has gone back basically as long as I can remember. My household was very much a sports watching household. American football was first, but then you'd probably go with basketball, baseball, college basketball, college football. Soccer didn't necessarily enter the picture so much. I played soccer when I was a kid, like church league soccer that like at the time I lived in the suburbs, so every like white suburban child like is just forced into, and you're not even really playing the game, you're just showing up for the orange slices and Oreo cookies at halftime.
Yes, and the Capri Sun afterwards.
Yes, exactly. So that was my earliest soccer memory. Not exactly the best. It wasn't until 2010, at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, that I really started getting into soccer as a sport. Probably my earliest memory with the sport is Landon Donovan's goal against Algeria. That's one of my favorite sports memories. And I think if I had to like rewind it back to a point in time where I became a fan of football, it was that right there.
I just remember seeing Tim Howard just throw that ball out after the save and just Landon Donovan going down the side, and oh my god.
The absolute like euphoria.
That happened like
moment.
during the day. I think I was a junior in high school. Mm-hmm. And we were watching, and we just went, that captured a lot of America, I think, at that point.
It did. Yeah. I think, is it a stretch to say that America became a fan of soccer in that moment?
I don't think that's a stretch. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Like, that's one of the development of soccer as a sport in America is really interesting, especially like as it traced through the 90s going back to when we hosted the World Cup up through now. But like, I remember not only was that my introduction, and maybe the fact that it was my introduction also kind of like taints my perspective of this, but before that World Cup and that moment, I hadn't seen soccer enter like the general sports discourse in this country the way that it did. And just seeing like, I still to this day can just go on YouTube and pull up like videos of people's reactions around the country, you know, their live reactions to the Landon Donovan goal against Algeria.
Right, because I was like
and it still
3-4 years into YouTube.
Yeah, it was right then. Yeah, it was at that exact moment. And so, yeah, it still just absolutely gives me chills every time I see it. And so I was mostly just into international soccer at that point. Between the 2010 World Cup, which ended in heartbreak against Ghana, and the 2014 World Cup, I followed, you know, qualification. I watched the U.S.'s Gold Cup runs, things like that. But I didn't really follow club soccer at all to that point. Another big moment for me came in 2011 at the Women's World Cup. Abby Wambach's goal against Brazil. That's another one.
That's
chills.
That's a classic.
Yeah, I was watching that with my sister at a bar.
They let you into a bar 8 years ago?
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't it was not a 21 only bar at the time because it was in the afternoon.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And yeah, the stoppage. It was at the end of stoppage time, in extra time. Her header to force penalties, where the U.S. ultimately won. That's another one that you show me that clip on YouTube 1,000 times, just hook it to my veins. Yeah. And again, that also ended in heartbreak against Japan in the final.
Don't remind me, jeez.
But so yeah, the 2014 World Cup. I think I watched basically every match that I could anyway, in Brazil. Whereas in previous ones, I was mostly just focused on the U.S. This is where like I really just got into the entire tournament from start to finish. And then by the time that tournament finished, I was like, I want more. Is this it? And so a couple of my friends were getting into it too. And so like I wanted to follow a club. And I had no idea where to start. I didn't know if I should start in MLS. It had just been announced that Atlanta was getting a franchise, but that wasn't going to actually happen for a few more years. So I was like, I'm not going to pick some other city here, you know. So I figured I centered on the Premier League, just because that's most of the people that I knew who had any passing interest in football were following Premier League side. And the other big thing for me was the fact that Premier League matches are all available to be either televised or streamed here in the States. So I was getting into the Premier League, and I didn't know what team to pick. One of my friends was a big City supporter. And so I kind of just wanted to spite him, if I'm being completely honest. I wanted to pick a top 6 club, because I knew that if I'm just getting into the sport, if I pick like Newcastle United or something like that, I'm probably not going to stick with it, to be honest.
Right.
So I narrowed it down to the top 6. I wasn't going to pick City because I didn't want to pick his team. I didn't want to pick Manchester United because that was the team that like everyone else I knew was a supporter of. So I didn't want to go with them either. To me, they were like the Yankees of the Premier League.
Makes sense, yeah. Thankfully, both have been on the downturn recently.
And then I didn't want to pick Chelsea either because at the time they were the defending champs. So I felt like I'd be a bandwagoner. So it came down to Spurs, Liverpool, and Arsenal. And for whatever reason, Spurs just didn't move the needle for me. So it really came down to Liverpool and Arsenal. I was extremely close to picking Liverpool, except my friend, who was a City supporter, he really hated Arsenal for some reason. So I picked Arsenal. Naturally.
Right.
Was it a wise decision? Still working on that. But we're
Time
there.
will tell.
Come on, you Gunners. We got it. Tried and true. I'll ride or die now, you know.
Right.
I'm locked in. I hear people who like try to get into it and then they pick a team and that team sucks and they're like, I'm just going to switch teams. I'm like, no, you cannot do that. You know, you pick a team, you stick with that team.
Yes.
And from 2014 onward, I've been an Arsenal supporter, watched everything I can, and it's been a ride. Interestingly, my anime fandom kind of matches that as well. I realize I've been hogging the mic here for forever, but don't worry. As soon as I get through this, you can talk my head off.
No, this is much more interesting than my story. So continue on. You're the one with almost 100,000 subscribers, which, you know, if any listeners out there want to contribute to that, you can go to youtube.com and search for Under the Scope to subscribe to the #1 source of quality content and by a Moe apologist.
It's funny,
the one,
you know,
the only Jack Under the Scope.
I said this to Taylor the other day on Twitter. Like, you're literally better at marketing myself than I am.
It's fun, you know. I
routinely forget to put link stuff or mention or plug myself, do all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's.
You know, that's what I'm here for.
Exactly. Hashtag 100K.
Yes. Hashtag UTS 100K. Let's get it trending on Twitter.
There we go. Yeah. Worldwide trending. So yeah, my anime fandom began kind of around the same time. It was my sister who got me into anime. If you want to go way back, kind of like how I played soccer, quote unquote, played soccer when I was a kid, I watched anime when I was a little kid, but that was like Pokemon and a tiny bit of Dragon Ball, mostly just Pokemon. And to me, that was just another cartoon, you know? That was the same thing to me as anything I would watch on like Cartoon Network or anything like that. It was just another thing on TV that was fun to watch on Saturday, you know? In my head, I didn't think of it as something foreign, as something from another country, like, you know, from Japan specifically. It was just a cartoon. So I don't really count that as my introduction to anime. To me, that more of came when, in about like 2012 or something like that, my sister showed me a few Studio Ghibli films. The first that I ever watched was Spirited Away. And then after that was Princess Mononoke. And then a couple more from there. And that was sort of when anime became anime to me. Like, I saw the animated medium as something that was more than what I thought it was. Because when I was growing up and stuff, I knew of anime, but in my head, it was literally just the big three. It was just action battle shonen. Which, you know, now I laugh at myself because, like, now when I come across someone who thinks that, I'm like, no.
It's funny how that happens.
Exactly. It's still such a prevalent attitude too. So yeah, I was one of those people for a long time there. And
we all gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we all have our bloody history. So that was my introduction to anime was with Studio Ghibli. But it wasn't until I watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That was when I was like, okay, anime. I want to watch more of this specifically. You know, like Ghibli films, those are awesome and great. But like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is what made me realize, like, okay, there is a whole world of these series out here that I have been completely missing out on this whole time, thinking it was something else that it wasn't. And that was just off Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Like, I still had hardly even dipped my toe into the variety that anime has to offer as a medium. Which I quickly then did by... Well, the second anime I watched was Kimi ni Todoroki.
Oh, From Me to You. Okay. That's a
that
very
would
sweet...
not... Usually, that wouldn't be what you would think I would stumble across as my second anime coming off of Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, that's like a classic shoujo.
Yeah. From classic shonen to classic shoujo. Yeah. Oh, that was a sign of things to come. My shoujo trash. Yeah. I don't even know how I came across that. I feel like I wanted to watch like something like... I wanted to watch some sort of like romance series for some reason. And I looked up like recommendations. I honestly think I came across it on like a Yahoo Answers page.
Yo, the days before like people were really on our anime, or like we had like Mal had before really not taken off, so you either had to like resort to like pro boards and forums, or you had to go to like A on 4chan, which you know,
yeah. So naturally, my forum of choice was Yahoo Answers.
Right. You know, I can't blame
high class here.
Between that and A, I would usually take Yahoo Answers.
That's fair. So yeah, I think that's how I ultimately stumbled across Kimi ni Todoroki. But then after that, like I kind of watched a bunch of romance stuff. I watched Clannad at some point in there. Somehow Death Note then worked its way.
It's a romance, you know,
amongst all those romance series I was watching. Yeah, that was upon recommendation by my sister. Another one I watched pretty early on in my anime viewing days was Sword Art Online. My introduction into anime I didn't like. This is not an SAO bashing podcast. There is plenty of discussion.
This is a head bashing podcast.
Yeah, there we go.
Post bashing. Too many off the post for my taste.
Yeah. Yikes. And the rest was history, pretty much. At that point, I was certified trash. You know, I was locked in.
Right. And we're all thankful for it, you know?
Exactly.
It's you know, turned out fairly positively, I'd say.
Right, exactly. And for a long time, my anime fandoms and football fandoms were similar because I didn't have a ton of people to talk to and like share those experiences with. Because again, still most of the people I was friends with, and also the people in my family, if they were into sports, they were into other sports mainly. And if they were into anime, well, no, they just weren't into anime.
Right.
I just didn't know anyone that was in anime at all.
Right.
So there was that problem, and that's ultimately why I created a YouTube channel. Hashtag UTS 100K.
Let's get it.
Ultimately, yeah, I found myself wanting to discuss my fandom towards those in some way. That materialized into an anime channel. And as my football fandom has grown stronger and stronger, that materialized into the Football is Anime podcast.
Hey, we brought it full circle.
We made it. Podcast over.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
So, Taylor, tell me I will finally shut up. Finally shut up. And let you enlighten us with your origin story into both football and anime. Let's hear it.
All right. Well, for me, conveniently, I was introduced to the two of them at the same time. So growing up, I don't even know how old I was. But one of my earliest memories is like visiting my relatives in Korea and watching an anime, which I now know was dubbed in Korea as Jurassic World Park. And now in Japan was called Dragon League. And it's apparently a soccer anime that came out in like 1993. It's got a 7.17 on Mal. So there are people who have seen this. I don't remember anything about it, but my parents were like, oh, like, you know, I would just like sing the OP all the time, you know, the way like really annoying kids do. But like I didn't really consciously think of soccer and anime in that way. Like I grew up with anime, you know, just like as an Asian kid would. Like my parents, like I would ask my aunts and my uncles to send me like anime VHS tapes for Christmas and for my birthday.
Classic.
So I have like VHS Korean dubs of J. Decker Brave Police, which is like a 90s mecha anime by Sunrise. And like I had asked them to send me like manga of like Naruto and Bleach and One Piece and especially Detective Conan, and in Korean, because in the US like they were way behind in the translated manga volumes than Korea. Korea basically got them like the week after Japan did translated.
Interesting.
So I guess it was just like easier for them at the time to do it.
Yeah, I suppose.
They had the infrastructure to do so. That was back when I could like read Korean at a semi-proficient level. Now that, you know, we have translated manga, I haven't had to read Korean in years. So. But yeah, so I would read a lot of manga, watch a lot of anime. Like, you know, grew up with Cardcaptor Sakura on, you know, Kids WB and 4Kids, Fox Kids, that kind of thing. And then, let's see, I played a bit of soccer growing up, but my parents said, like, I was more interested in chasing butterflies than the ball. So my soccer career wasn't very promising as a child.
No Aguero Kuns here.
No Aguero Kuns here. When I was in 4th grade, our team won the like district championship, and like we made it to state. I missed pretty much the entire second half of the season with the flu. So it was no thanks to me that we made that run.
Yeah.
The coach was nice enough to still give me a trophy.
Yeah, I was going to say, meanwhile, at the end, you're still like, all right, I'm here for my ring fitting.
Right? So please, also, the orange slices, too. Can't forget about those. Yeah. So I kind of had that soccer-wise, but for me, like, my dad and my mom are also huge sports fans. So my dad's a huge American football fan. When he was growing up in Korea, he lived near a U.S. military base, and so he said, whereas other neighborhoods might have played more, you know, football, soccer, he played American football most of the time with his friends, but was also a fan of, you know, footy, as the rest of the world calls it. And
what team did he support?
American football?
Yeah.
He was a 49ers fan because they were the ones shown the most on TV when he was growing up.
That makes sense. But was that Joe Montana years?
Those were the Joe Montana years. He was like, it was always like Cowboys and 49ers they would show on TV.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
With the American Forces Network.
I was going to guess one of those, too.
Right? Yeah, it was like the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, so that would make sense. And then my mom's side of the family were huge baseball fans. My grandpa, so my mom's dad, was a very good baseball player all throughout high school and played some in college as well. So like he made sure my mom and her sister and her 2 brothers were all like huge baseball fans growing up. So like watching sports was kind of our thing together growing up, and especially soccer became something during the 2002 World Cup when Korea made it to the semifinals.
Oh yeah, that was the joint hosted World Cup, right, with Korea and Japan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where Japan did most of the group stages and Korea did most of the knockout stages. And so, like, you know, I remember, like, being woken up at, like, 2, 3 a.m. or some ungodly time of the night, especially for, like, a 9-year-old, right?
Right.
And, like, watching soccer games. I had no idea how the game was played. This was also the time when I was on the team, so I had no idea how the game was played while I was on the team. So I really don't think my absence hurt the team too much. And so I started, like, kind of following soccer then, and like I watched the 2006 World Cup for Korea. We were, you know, hoping for some extra glory, but that was not to be.
Yeah.
And then in around 2010, same moment for me as for you, with the US in that World Cup in South Africa. And I just remember at that time, I think I was a junior in high school, and there was so much advertisement going on about it being 10, and I remember there were like a bunch of really cool Nike commercials about like what it means to be the number 10 and what like the number 10 what it signifies, and like having all these things about like Messi and like all these players around the world. It's like, this is so cool, you know, follow Team USA. That was and I remember the US UK match, the England match, where
that was great.
They drew.
Yep.
And there was that one goal where it like hit the English goalkeeper, and then it just like rolled in past the the line for a goal.
Oh, it was
and
an absolute
every
howler.
headline being like,
Yeah.
U.S. wins 1-1 or 2-2 or whatever the score was, and just being like, okay, I can kind of work with this. And then with the 2011 Women's World Cup, I just remember really starting to follow it at that time. I just graduated high school. You know, there's not much to do the summer after you graduate high school and before you go to college. Like, you're hanging out with friends, but you're also like, what are we gonna do while we're hanging out? Like, you can only play so many video games.
Exactly. Hey, the summer between high school and college was a World Cup for me too.
Oh, nice.
2014.
So yeah, and so I was like, okay, like the Women's World Cup was going on, and then there was a lot of discussions going around at that point, and I was like a Sports Illustrated like diehard reader at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like a lot of discussions. I remember one of them was one of the women for, I forget which team, like accidentally picked up the ball in the inside the box, and they were saying, oh, it should have been a handball and it should have been a penalty, but she like dropped it and the referee let it go. And they're like, oh, like, are the referees like looking down at women because, you know, they're just saying like, oh, she didn't mean to do that. And like there were all these like gender equality comments going around. And so for me, I was like, oh, this is really interesting to read, to learn about. So the U.S. is playing Japan in the final, and the Japanese team had a really good story behind them. It was right after the 2011 earthquake, and it was like a good feel-good story, but the U.S. completely choked. I mean, we shouldn't have let that go to extra time, and then we just collapsed. I mean, we just looked tired. We didn't look like we really wanted it. And I remember Sports Illustrated or some other publication ran an article saying like, you know, the U.S. shouldn't be congratulated for coming in second. That's a disservice to them. They were supposed to be the better team. We should be talking about how the U.S. choked. And to me, I was like a huge football fan at the time, like diehard Steelers fan. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the Packers after that 2010.
Yeah, the timing there was pretty great.
Yeah. I don't know about that. But yeah, so I was like, okay, so like, you know, reading up on the discourse, and like that to me was what had always interested in me about sports, was the narratives that went on there, the group dynamics, kind of the same thing with anime, right? And just like the storylines that get built up. And so as I'm heading off to college, my best friend from high school was a huge soccer fan and had been like pestering me for years to like get into soccer and follow soccer. So I was like, all right, I'll pick a club. So originally, I was going to pick Manchester United because of Park Ji-sung, who is the Korean captain and also played for Manchester United. And like for my birthday, I had asked my grandpa to send me a Park Ji-sung Manchester United jersey if they had one in Korea. And I was like, okay, then I'll be a Man United supporter. But he didn't. He sent me a national team jersey, and that mistake is probably the best mistake that's ever happened in my life, because I would have been a filthy Man United supporter otherwise.
That mistake allowed this podcast to happen.
Exactly. You know what? I wouldn't even want to talk to myself on a podcast if I was
as a Liverpool supporter. I would say, yeah.
So I was trying to decide. My friend was a Chelsea supporter. And so I was obviously not going to support Chelsea, and I wanted to pick.
I'm glad we had common ground there.
Exactly. That's just what you do. So I wasn't going to pick Chelsea. I didn't want to pick United anymore because that felt like the bandwagoner thing to do. And like Park Ji-sung was on his last leg, so there was no way there would be much of a Korean connection there anymore.
That was a short-term investment.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it, and around that time, like I heard some good things about Liverpool. I did some research. I loved the loyalty they had in the team. They had a lot of history behind them, but they weren't very good now, which meant I wouldn't be a bandwagoner if I decided to support them.
Yeah, exactly.
And an author I really liked at the time, John Green, had just come out with a book, The Fault in Our Stars, and like tweeted and talked excessively about Liverpool Football Club. And I was like, well, at least I'll know someone in the U.S. who talks about Liverpool. So I decided to pick Liverpool, and it was a bad investment early on because we were pretty terrible for those first couple years, 11, 12, and 12, 13. You know, we were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and administration because of the owners just not having the money that they said they did. But at the same time, I was also starting to kind of get into anime as more than just something I watched as a hobby. but something I watched a little more closely, and that actually came out of the fact that I almost stopped watching anime altogether. And I've told this story before on the Our Anime podcast. But what happened was, you go to college, you're a freshman, you meet someone you really like, and you're like, okay, like they're really cute, they're really nice, I like talking to them, let's talk about like some shared interest. And she was like, oh, there's this anime that's come out recently that I think is like the best anime to come out in years. I think you'll really like it. It's called Blue Exorcist. I watched it and I was like, let's just say I didn't really talk to this person much after that. I'm not saying it was because of their anime recommendations, but yeah, I was like, man, if like this is the best anime to come out in years, I don't really want to watch anime much anymore.
Oh, painted your perspective of the entire medium.
Yeah, and but then after that, the next semester or so, I was thinking like, man, I'll just like stop watching anime. It's a childish thing to do. I think so. That was 2012. Sword Art Online was just announced, and I was like, oh, this is like pretty cool. Attack on Titan, I think, was a year away, and I think I saw like recently after that. I watched Steins Gate. I was like catching up on all these different anime that were coming out at that time. I was like, this is really cool. This is really interesting. And then when I got to college, my good friend Drew, who was also a huge sports fan and also a huge anime fan, I was like, okay, like we can actually talk about these things and I can kind of start getting into this. And then I was also on Our Anime a lot at the time. I started off just watching more like shonen battle stuff, as most people are wont to do. And then it kind of shifted after I watched it. I watched Clannad, which was pretty good. Well, at least After Story was. I didn't like original Clannad too much. And then I meant to watch Kara no Kyokai, but I accidentally watched Kyokai no Kanata by Kyoto
A
Animation
common mistake,
instead.
I would say. Those are basically the same.
They are. I mean, I feel like a lot of people will be mad. But long story short, I started becoming much more into anime around that time in college as well, and following stuff, being on Our Anime. And because I was on Reddit, I discovered Our Soccer, and so I had a whole new community to talk soccer with and Liverpool with. And we were all banded together by our trauma of 11 and 12, and then 2013-14 happened, and then we were all banded together by our trauma of what happened in 2013-2014. Which, if people don't know, is probably the biggest choke in recent Premier League history. Liverpool could have won the title that year, but just blew it by the ends. We really slipped, to put it one way.
Isn't it incredible how there's almost nothing more galvanizing for a group of people than a great choke?
There really isn't. And I feel like it's the same way with like bad anime. Like I really bonded with like friends on Our Anime after like we watched like terrible shows together. Like the episode discussion threads of terrible anime, like it's a lot of fun. People bond together over tragedy much more than they do over like things they really enjoy.
A shared love versus a shared hate.
Yeah. I mean, we both hate Man United. We both hate Chelsea. You hate Tottenham more than I do, but I think I would hate Tottenham more if it wasn't for Son Heung-min.
No, 100%. If we're talking top 6 clubs, Liverpool is absolutely the other one that I can get down with. Like them being successful, I have nothing against Liverpool. I actually like them a little bit.
I have a lot of respect for Arsenal and your fans. AFC TV has a lot of great memes.
Yes, AFC TV is probably my most watched YouTube channel.
It's great.
I probably have watched more AFC TV than my own channel. That's pretty much it for our origin stories, yeah.
Hopefully they were entertaining.
Hopefully. God, I hope. We both went on for like 20 minutes each there, at least.
We did.
I might have even been 25.
Well, it's big for us. It's important. And I feel like a lot of people, especially within our generation, our age group, have similar stories for how they got into anime and how they got into soccer. Because,
absolutely.
As we've mentioned, they both started getting into each other at big at the same time. Like Crunchyroll started becoming like much bigger around like 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. Netflix started carrying anime around then too. The NBC picked up the Premier League, in 2012, I want to say.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was like a year or so before like I started following it, 2 years maybe. Yeah. No, exactly. And I think it's interesting because like to me, I go to anime and I go to football and really kind of sports in general for similar things, right? Like at the end of the day, they're both forms of entertainment, obviously, to go as high level as you possibly can. But the same drama and storylines that I love to get out of anime are also there in sports and in football. And not just like, we're not even just talking about crazy results and crazy goals and following teams and stuff, but like the human stories, of the people in this game.
Right.
I think can oftentimes be so incredible, as well as a platform for a lot of interesting social conversation on key issues and stuff. Like, like you mentioned earlier about the gender inequality between the women's game and the men's game. And I know that's been highly discussed topic lately, especially with the U.S. women's national team filing that lawsuit back in the spring, and then possibly like the best female soccer player in the world is not competing in the Women's World Cup, specifically protesting the inequality and like the lack of support that the national team has been given from their FA. And it's something that you see all across the globe pretty much in the women's game.
In other sports as well.
For sure. In all sports, yeah. And then obviously not just sports too. And I think that sports can be a reflection of like societal issues in that way. And because of that, they can be a great platform for discussing change about them. I mean, like, again, if you want to go to the NFL and look at like the anthem protests in recent years and stuff, and how athletes in the NFL used their platform to speak out about police brutality in America. And like that's always something that I found interesting about sports. And then of course you also have like human interest stories and like the really like uplifting stuff. Again, you mentioned in 2011, as heartbroken as I was that the U.S. lost that final, I couldn't bring myself to dislike, the Japanese women's national team.
Right.
Because the story was it was amazing. I mean, they went on this incredible run. It was right after the earthquake, was it? And
I don't know. I was still pretty salty. I wanted that gold medal.
Oh, I was salty. Yeah. Like, but my salty was more what I'm saying is like it was more directed inward.
Right.
Then a lot of times like when my team, right, loses a huge match like that, I'm like, whoever the opponent is, like, oh, I hate them for life.
Right.
Just for that petty reason.
Like how I hate the Packers, right?
Exactly. But with Japan, like, I don't know, I couldn't bring myself to do that because like at the same time as you're sad for your country and the team that you support and the athletes that you followed, like you have to appreciate what these other people have done, and the really inspiring like hope that they, I think, instilled in a lot of people in Japan at the time. It was really a sight to see. And at the same time, like anime, while we're obviously not talking about some of that stuff because we're talking about fictional stories here, but anime can also be a medium that's used to tell really such incredible stories. Things that move people, things that comment on certain issues and whatnot. And so at the end of the day, my fandoms for both are rooted in that same like yearning. And so I think that that's something that, like I said, I think that's something that draws people to them, and is ultimately why I wanted to make this podcast.
And a good podcast it is.
Exactly.
Or at least I hope so. I hope the people at home or whatever you're listening to agree. If you agree, you should sub to JDS.
Well, I will step off my soapbox now. And before we end this first edition of the podcast, I want to get to two segments that will appear in every episode for the future. The first is something I like to call the Football is Anime segment. Wonder where I got that from.
It's
so
a
the
good
idea
title.
of this is that every month we find the craziest moment, soundbite, controversy, something from the month that was in the football world that once and for all proves that football is in fact anime. The type of thing you'd only expect to see in anime actually happening. So this month we had a lot to choose from. I'm sure you've been keeping up with the Women's World Cup and all that's been going on the last few weeks. Initially, I was actually going to go in the direction of making this month's football is anime moment the US's 13-0 win over Thailand, which you and I were messaging back and forth during that, joking about the fact. I was like, I said, at what point do we feel bad for Thailand? And Taylor says, 13 goals, one for each original colony.
I think at that point it was like 9-0. I was like, there's no way we score 4 goals in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was like it was past the 80th minute.
And then it was like, oh, this is really happening. Oh, now I actually do feel kind of mad.
But I'm having to take this in a different direction because the final 2 days of the group stage at the Women's World Cup have been insanity. Let me break it down here. We're going to run through this, okay?
All right.
So it started off with the Scotland and Argentina match. Argentina was sitting on 1 point, Scotland on 0. Scotland had to win to have a chance to advance. And as it turned out, they only needed a 1-goal difference to win, and they would have advanced. And in the 69th minute, Aaron Cuthbert gave them a 3-0 lead, which they promptly blew.
Oh, boy.
It was an Ajax-level choke. I mean, legitimately. This felt like a continuation of the Champions League semifinals. Argentina were awarded a clear penalty by VAR in stoppage time. Actually, sorry, it wasn't in stoppage time. It was in like the 89th minute, and the lengthy review carried it well into stoppage time.
All right.
And initially, the Scottish keeper made the save, but VAR came in again and ruled that she came off the line. So there was a retake, and Florencia Bonsegundo makes no mistake the second time. 3-3 draw, final. Scotland goes packing. That was rough.
It was crazy. I just remember, I think I had originally, so like I was watching Scotland Argentina, and I was like, okay, this is off, and like this is done, right? There's no way. I stopped watching at like the 85th minute, or like right before the own goal, essentially, when it was 3-1, to watch the other games. And then I remember like one of the commentators being like, oh, they're just going to they're reviewing, and then I was like, oh, they're reviewing they say it is a penalty. And I was like, at those times, it's almost like more fun for me to listen to what other people are saying than watching what actually happens. So I was like, I was committed to this. I was like committed to just listening to what they were going to say about this. And then they were like, they're looking to see whether or not the keeper went off her line. Oh, she went off her line. She's gonna retake the penalty. She's good. And like they're going nuts. And meanwhile, this whole other game is going on at the same time. So it was, I was kind of getting a like third hand, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was, especially after 2013, 2014 for Liverpool and our famed collapse against Crystal Palace when Liverpool were up 3-0. I didn't really want to watch another 3-0 lead get blown. If it was Barcelona against us, it's fine. That was 4 goals anyway.
Yeah. I was pulling for Scotland. I felt bad for him too. I actually like, so I had the game on like one tab, and then I was also following Scottish Twitter at the time. I was looking at like hashtags and stuff, and wow, that was a riot. So apparently Scotland is like, within their country, they're well known for like all their national teams just absolutely bottling it and choking on the world stages in sports. So this was like one more for the road.
So they're like the Atlanta of Europe.
You know what? How was that Eastern Conference final last year? Didn't choke that one. Your New York Red Bulls.
Yeah, that's true. You got me there.
I will say one thing I did want to say about the Scotland thing, though, was that I really am not a fan of these VAR decisions ruling keepers coming off the line. It's happened multiple times now in this World Cup, and what I don't fully understand, I guess they've made it a point of emphasis, because in other major tournaments, men's and women's both, like that have VAR implemented, I haven't been seeing any of these calls being made.
The thing is, so I was watching the U20 World Cup as well recently because Korea was making a crazy run there, and Korea went to penalties against Senegal, and on Korea's 5th penalty kick, the Senegal keeper blocked the shot, but on VAR ruled that he went off the line a little early. So I can't say too much about being mad about that.
You personally benefited from it, right? So, well, that is telling, though, so that if that's going on at the U20 World Cup this summer, like, that does just tell you that this is definitely coming down from FIFA.
Right.
But I don't know. My problem with it is that, like, I get the whole letter of the law thing, but I feel like it's missing the spirit of the law in the sense that it's supposed to be clear and obvious error. And to me, a clear and obvious error is not one that you have to go frame by frame through.
See was the back of her heel just off the line?
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. And, it should, if the ref can't notice on the field, then to me it's not egregious enough.
I'm going to stay silent because that's how Korea advanced.
That's fair. Yeah.
But
your silence speaks volumes, actually.
Yeah.
However, there was more craziness going on in the Women's World Cup.
It was not the end.
As if that wasn't enough, the final day of group play almost topped it. Either side, between Cameroon and New Zealand, needed a win to advance. And after taking a 1-0 lead just after the half, Cameroon accidentally slotted in the equalizer into her own net on a horrible, dreadful mishit clearance in the box in the 80th minute. I felt so bad. Like,
right.
It's just one of those horrible mistakes. It was a really high ball that was like kind of coming in straight down, and she just mistimed her kick off. Like, it was catastrophic. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the replay.
Yeah, it was. Your heart goes out for mistakes like that because it's like no one wants to see that, right? Or maybe like people who are rooting for New Zealand do. But like if you're
Argentina
like no one wants to see some, or if you're an Argentina supporter, you do. But like if you're watching the game and like you have like you're neutral or something, you don't want the game to end up or someone's tournament's hopes to be ruined on a mistake like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. And you could just see how like crushed the Cameroon player was, because they she knows the stakes in that moment. Like if they hold on to that 1-0 lead, they're through. And instead now, as it stands, they're going home. However, she can rest easy tonight because Ajara shot Cameroon through to the knockout round on the literal final touch of the game in the 95th minute.
I love that saying so much. Like, scores it on his or their first touch of the game, or like finishes it with the last kick of the game. But so rarely is it the actual first or last touch that person has had.
Exactly.
But no, this is the actual last kick of the game.
There's nobody that felt better on that pitch than the Cameroon 100%. Player who had scored that own goal.
Yeah, she goes immediately. She's gonna go up to there immediately. Like, dinner's on me. Whatever you want. Yeah. Like you're not gonna have to worry about where you're sleeping tonight or sleeping for a while. Cause like you need a place to crash. You need food. Like I got your back. Yeah. Cause man, oof, that could have been bad.
But that wasn't all. We keep going.
No.
I promise this segment usually won't be this long, but there was really that much craziness happening here. The final match of the day, as the United States was completing their sweep of the group stage against Sweden, was Chile versus Thailand. And Chile really looked, this was one going in that I'm thinking, there's not really much of a chance of anything going on here. The scenario was for either Chile or Thailand to advance. Chile needed a 3-goal win. Thailand technically could have advanced with a 14-goal win. Courtesy of
was
the
14
US.
Enough? Because they had a negative 17 goal differential.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can thank the US for that one. Yeah. So the real scenario here was that Chile needed to win by 3 goals to advance. And going into the match, they were the only team in the entire tournament who had yet to score a goal. And now they had to find 3 of them.
Even Thailand had scored
Yes.
in their previous match.
Even Thailand notched one in against Sweden, which was honestly one of my favorite moments of the tournament so far.
Oh, the emotion on the face of the coach when they scored that goal.
Yeah, and there's a really great thread on Twitter that I read about. She's like the president of like football operations or whatever, or player development, something like that for Thailand. Who's like a really strong backing of the Thailand national team when the FA generally like hasn't given them that support. Like she's been there, and like she was the woman on the sideline who like cameras showed like her like really emotional response to that goal. And so reading that story after the fact was really incredible. And I think that, that's something that the World Cup brings out of the game that's so beautiful.
Right.
But about this game, so it was scoreless at half. And I'm thinking Chile need 3 goals in the second half, just like Argentina did, basically, to make this any, interesting at all. They managed to get 2 of them. And there's a penalty awarded in stoppage time again for Chile, also off of VAR. Francisca Laura steps up to take the penalty and hits the crossbar. Chile goes packing. That's it. Nigeria were the benefactors of that missed penalty, giving us the completed round of 16 bracket. Did you manage to catch your breath?
It was a lot, and like, you think we can't manufacture this much drama. Like, if this was a show, people would be like, oh, this is too unrealistic. There wouldn't be this much last-minute drama in this many games at the same time.
God, look at these ass pulls, I mean, just like coming out of nowhere. Like, just fake, forced melodrama.
Right. A forced melodrama. My favorite.
I love that term.
Oh, man. Ugh.
And that's the thing. And you're getting all of this within a span of, like, less than 48 hours.
Right. It was absolutely nuts. And now we have the round of 16 going on. That's going to be crazy to see.
We do, yeah. It's an interesting bracket. I think, I gotta say, I'm pretty sad about the fact that the U.S. and France could possibly meet as early as the quarterfinal.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you like to... That's a matchup that's worthy of the final, to me.
But, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best.
That's true. And either the France or the United States could say that, because you're probably looking at
exactly. Well, first the U.S. needs to get past Spain.
Correct.
Don't jinx it yet.
No, and France needs to get past Brazil. I mean,
this is true.
There's a lot of work to be done before that happens. So no counting or.
I mean, how many times have we seen in sports teams look past their opponent to the next round and then get obliterated?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the World Cup. Anything can happen.
As we saw on the men's side.
Yeah.
Who had Croatia in the final.
Yeah, Croatia, what a run that was.
Who had England in the semifinal.
Who had Korea beating Germany 2-0 to make sure Germany couldn't get to the group stage.
I know you were happy with that
world
result.
Champs. I cried at my desk. I was at work when that happened. When Son Heung-min scored that goal, I literally sobbed at my desk.
Speaking of Korea, hey, how about that U20 World Cup?
Yeah, just the second team to make it to the U20 final, Asian country to make it to the U20 final. The previous team had been Japan a number of years back. Crazy run by Korea. Very, very proud of the team. A lot of good young talent there. That Senegal match was absolutely nuts. When they won that Senegal match, I was like, okay, they're like, Ecuador is going to be no match for them. They're just going to keep going. There's something going on behind them because they just kept battling, kept going through, and it was like, these kids, like Korea's not known for being like a very soccer intensive country. Like there's been more of an emphasis in recent years, ever since like 2002, and then now with Son Heung-min being so like famous, the dude is basically a god in Korea. Like he can do no wrong. I'm pretty sure like people have worshipped the ground he walks on when he comes back.
I'll bet there's a lot of Spurs fans in Korea.
Oh yeah, so everyone who is a United supporter is now a Spurs.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, they did eventually lose to Ukraine at the end. Ukraine played a very good game. Korea kind of just seemed like they were happy, and they were also exhausted by the end. The conditions were ridiculously hot and humid in Poland. But yeah, like Korea tried their best. You don't always win, and we see this in sports anime all the time. You don't see teams winning at all in the first season.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. But
You gotta have the comeback story. It's like Sound Euphonium.
Exactly.
My favorite sports anime.
Exactly. And then, I'm sure they made a couple of oaths to each other to do well
Something.
at the next
Yeah,
World Cup.
exactly. You gotta save it for the finale.
Yeah, so like a promises finale, I think.
With like
That sounds
exactly.
like a title,
It's a new
right?
season. You could even say it's a brand new day.
Oh.
Oh, we just lost all our viewers.
They were just like, we got through the backstory, we got through the story, we even got to the anime. But when they're making UFO title puns, that's when we're
It's
at.
honestly incredible that we went this long without either of us saying something about euphonium. I think we can wrap this one down. On the next episode, we will have a lot to break down. We're probably mostly going to be focusing in on the wrapping up the Women's World Cup, and I'm sure we're also going to have a lot to talk about related to the Copa America, which Japan is in. Yes. I am all for it.
They were like, okay, we'll give you an invite to the Copa America if you give us Awkward's backstage tickets.
I would take that
They're
deal.
really big fans of Love Live back there. Yo, corruption for Love Live tickets. You can't blame them.
You know what? If I was the head of the FA, like money laundering, bribery, all that stuff, no. I'm getting like UFO tickets, idol concerts.
Yo, gotcha game summon tickets.
That's what.
Give me that review star like crystals.
When my career ultimately leads me to become president of FIFA is still going to be just as corrupt as before, but instead of like raking in like oil money, we're going to be rolling in like anime figurines.
Yeah. Truly the best timeline.
So I want to end this podcast with another segment that I like to call Next Time on the Football is Anime podcast, where we each predict what we'll be talking about on the next episode in the style of like next episode previews from anime. I'm going bold, right?
Super bold.
U.S. Women's National Team. Next episode, we are going to be talking about how the U.S. won their second consecutive and fourth overall Women's World Cup title in an incredible run where they took out Spain, France, England, Germany in that order. It's not coming home because we're sending England home.
That's true. It's coming back to its rightful home.
Hey, I don't know, but like maybe on the women's side. Definitely not on the men's side. We just went 2 years between competitive matches.
Yeah, that was not great.
But yeah, the women. That's who we're here for.
Yes, that's where it's at.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's my not so bold prediction that the number one team in the world is going to retain their title.
All right, it's a wrap. Everyone, if the U.S. lose to Spain, you know who to blame. I
will gladly take all shit, Yeah. I'm putting myself out there, so if they fail us, then lay it on me. Do your worst. I promise you, whatever you can do is nothing worse than what Arsenal has already done to me.
Oof. Hey, at least you have European football. There were a couple years where Liverpool weren't even in Europe, man. We never left England.
Yeah, that is that better though? Or is it more painful to just keep having that just flicker of hope?
Enjoy Zenit St. Petersburg away.
It's exactly.
Ludogorets.
Another trip to Baku.
Oh, and also, as always, there's going to be more fan service and the next one. To quote Misato, service.
On that note, I hope you all enjoyed the first edition of the Football is Anime podcast. I think we have a lot of exciting ideas and stuff going forward. I think this is going to be a lot of fun doing this, and I hope that we can create like a fun discussion and community around this podcast because, like I said, this is two fandoms with a lot of, or not a lot of intersection, I mean. So just being able to bring that together is definitely, I think, a goal of ours.
And if they want to reach out to you, Jack, how can they find
absolutely.
you? In case they stumbled up
you
to this
can
podcast?
Follow the podcast at Football is Anime Pod, as well as myself at Jack UTS. And Taylor?
Yeah. Oh, you can find me at Fatesteel Taylor. And you can also find me talking a lot on the Our Anime podcast, which is primarily on YouTube. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and whatever. Just search the Our Anime podcast, and we will show up. We're currently doing another tournament style kind of thing in the best girl contest bracket that's going on right now. So, there's a lot of tournaments in my life currently.
I literally just forgot to plug my YouTube channel again.
Yeah,
I told you I'm bad at this.
I was like, is he not going to talk about the fact that, he's the number one quality content on YouTube.com?
TM.
Moy apologist. Yes, TM. With such videos like the making of Violet Evergarden on the airing seasonals, and you're the Fate specialist, and you have a really well-known video on the fights in Grimgar.
Oh yeah, let's bring that one up. I told you you're better at marketing me than me, Taylor. Let's hope that I'm better at marketing this podcast than my content.
You're doing a pretty good job right now. So and you know what? We're going to get better. So if you guys want to be along for the ride, be sure to subscribe to us. We're going to be wherever you can find podcasts. And
something like that. Yeah, we haven't actually gotten that far yet.
No, but we're getting there. And we're also going to be recording around once a month. So be on the lookout for that. If you have any suggestions or comments or questions, always just tweet out, the pod account, tweet at Jack, tweet at me, and we'll be more than happy to talk with you.
Absolutely. We're still very much a work in progress over here, so all ideas are welcome. Yes. And with that, tune in next time where Taylor will be our new social media coordinator.
Nice. All right, entry level job. Let's go.